will transition our program now that our nominee is ramping up. Vote Save America will be always your one-stop shop for staying involved and making a meaningful impact this year. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our National Training Director, Ashley Williams. Take it away.
Thanks, Alexis. So I am going to apologize ahead of time if my dog starts barking frantically. I hope we're all dog lovers. So we are here in the end of June. The start of this election cycle feels like literally a million years ago. We've all been through so much, pandemic, so many wild, crazy, emotional things. But as the primary has ended and there's a nominee, although some of us are still voting, if you're in New York City, you just voted 2 days ago. And as this training concludes, you all have laid the groundwork to be a volunteer leader this fall. But before we dig into tonight's training, I want to share a story. So 2 years ago, almost exactly to the day, I was in DC with 600 other women, and we were arrested as we were protesting Trump's family separation policy that, as we know, ripped babies and kids away from their parents. So for the past 1,252 days, Donald Trump has failed our country. His failed leadership has led to record unemployment, increased racial violence and hate crimes, and a pandemic with no end in sight. The American people and the world cannot afford another 4 years of this. So we know there's only one choice: electing progressives up and down the ticket. We have to hold the House, fire Mitch McConnell and at least 3 other conservatives in the Senate, and have a resounding victory in November. We cannot leave a single vote on the table. We cannot let our foot off the gas. We cannot let Donald Trump steal another election. The only way to get him out of the White House is to win this election by an overwhelming margin. So I don't say this lightly, but there is no room for error. We cannot fail. It's just not an option. So over the past few weeks, over 60,000 people have gone through this training so far. This is the end, but it's the largest political organizing training ever, which is amazing, but none of it really means anything if you all don't go out and apply what you've learned now until the polls close on the West Coast on Tuesday, November 3rd. So tonight, we're going to talk more about what you need to be doing right now to build up a massive group of volunteers that will be crucial to the outcomes of the election. And so I don't want to scare you. I'm sorry I showed you a bunch of Trump headlines, but I am worried that the recent poll numbers will make us all complacent. So before we dig in and before we introduce our first special guest, I want you to just take a minute and remember the reason you're here tonight. What was it that inspired you to take action right now? And I want you to hold on to that in your mind for the next 5 months until we fire Donald Trump once and for all. So now we're going to dig in, and I'm going to pass it over to our digital training manager from Florida. So if you adopted Florida, give her some love, and she's going to introduce us to our first special guest.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Shout out to everyone who adopted Florida. We need it. Thank you. I am so excited to introduce Dan Pfeiffer. Dan served for President Obama for 8 years as his communications director on both the 2008 campaign and in the White House, and finally as senior advisor to the president. He is the co-host of Pod Save America and author of Yes, We Still Can, Politics in the Age of Obama, Twitter, and Trump, and most recently, Untrumping America, a plan to make America a democracy again. He is also very invested in the success of his adopted state of North Carolina. Hi, Dan. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, all things considered, I'm good. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining. As Ashley pointed out, this is the most important election in history. And all those headlines that you put up on that screen they're sort of child's play compared to what we could see if Trump wins this election. We have it's easy to be scared by that, how daunting that task is, but it's also the greatest opportunity we have had in decades to change the direction of this country and put us on a progressive path from the top of the ticket all the way down the ballot. And so, but that only happens with everyone who is in this training and all the volunteers and recruits. I'm just so grateful for everyone who, despite everything else that is going on in the world in this absolutely crazy and terrible time, is here tonight and has been on these other trainings and is preparing to do everything they can for the next several months until this election is over and Donald Trump is on his way back to wherever Joe Biden's attorney general will send him.
Yes, I am very excited that there's so many people involved and who want to make sure that he gets out of the White House. We're all working really hard. So I have a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Of course.
I know you hear from a lot of listeners about their worries going into this election for 2020. What is something that you're worried about this year that we actually have some control to change?
Everything. My post, for people who listen to our podcast in 2016, where we would sort of reiterate this a saying in Obamaland called "no bedwetting," which was essentially meant "don't panic," right? Although it was taken to, we sometimes conveyed it in a way that suggested that no bedwetting also meant no worrying. And so my 2020 motto is worry about everything, panic about nothing. And so I am always able to find worries. I am one of the few people who would ever describe a glass as 1/10 empty. And so my worry today, and this is a high class worry, don't get me wrong, is what Ashley mentioned, which is complacency, right? I think complacency is one of the reasons why Donald Trump won in 2016, is that people thought it was in the bag, and therefore they didn't have to take time to volunteer or donate money if they could, or most importantly, go vote. And what we are going to ask people to do to vote in this election and this pandemic is going to be so far above and beyond what we've ever asked anyone to do before. If you've never filled out a mail ballot, that can be a very confusing, scary thing. To go stand in line for hours in the middle, potentially in the middle of a pandemic that is still going. And so complacency is what worries me, because if people think Joe Biden is definitely going to win and we're definitely going to take the Senate or we're definitely going to win all these other races, then they may not go. And so we have to do everything we can to make sure that all of our friends and family and everyone that we contact through the voter contact programs that people are going to volunteer for and work for know that we can leave no votes on the table. Because if this election is within field goal range, the combination of Donald Trump, voter suppression, and the courts could steal it from Joe Biden. And so we have to do everything we can to fight complacency. So that is a thing that worries me, but it is a thing that we have control over, because we have the ability to explain to as many people as we possibly can on a daily basis why we cannot be complacent. This is not in the bag, regardless of what the polls tell us.
Yeah, that is such a great answer. We definitely need to work on complacency. I know in 2016, I definitely had some few friends that fell into that category. So we know you adopted North Carolina. Do you want to make the case for why people should switch teams and commit to volunteering for North Carolina if they adopted another state?
Well, if they adopt a second state, right? I don't feel good about stealing people from other teams, because all of these electoral votes get us to 270. But if you had extra time, or you were convincing someone else, or you felt uncomfortable being on John Lovett's team, whatever the reason is, then here's the argument for North Carolina. North Carolina is the future of the Democratic Party. It is the Sun Belt that is turning blue. But in this case, it is a threefer, because if we win North Carolina, we can defeat Donald Trump. We can rip the gavel from Mitch McConnell's ghoulish little claws by electing Cal Cunningham, defeating Tom Tillis, who is terrible on his own. And we have the chance to flip the state legislature. In North Carolina in 2017, right after Governor Cooper was elected in 2016, we also have to re-elect Governor Cooper, the North Carolina Republicans use their supermajority that they received through unconstitutional gerrymandering to limit the powers of the newly elected Democratic governor. They have been the North Carolina Republicans have been the canary in the coal mine for all the terrible things Republicans are going to do. So, the North Carolina Republicans are so bad that I describe them to people sometimes as that they make Wisconsin Republicans look like Mitt Romney. And so but they taught the Republican Party how to undermine the will of the voter through anti-democratic efforts, voter suppression, gerrymandering, and all the above. If we beat them here, we can send a message that there is a political price to pay for using your political power to deny the majority the powers that they voted for. And so North Carolina, I think, is the forefront of what I believe is the battle that we're going to be fighting for a long time, which is the battle for our democracy, which is a much bigger challenge than Trump.
Yeah, I'm sure you got a few people to pick that North Carolina as their second state. I'm from Florida, born and raised. May go to North Carolina now.
Okay, well, there you go. That's excellent.
One last question. So I know we all have very strong feelings about who Biden should pick as the vice president. And I heard you have a new mini-series podcast all about the process of choosing a VP. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and when we can hear that?
Sure. Alyssa Mastromonaco, who worked in the Obama campaign with me and the Obama White House, and many of you know from Hysteria and Pod Save America, she and I have a 3-part miniseries that starts tomorrow on the Pod Save America feed. And the reason we're doing it, and I think it's important to credential Alyssa on this, which is Alyssa worked for John Kerry when John Kerry was being considered for vice president in 2000. She helped run the process for John Kerry in 2004 and helped run it for Barack Obama in 2008. I call her the foremost living expert on the vice presidential process. And we are not, the purpose of our podcast is not to predict who Joe Biden's going to pick. We do not know. It's not to tell people who we think Joe Biden should pick, because we do not have an answer to that either. It is to help take listeners behind the curtain to understand how the process works. I think the vice presidential process is the most discussed and least understood aspect of presidential politics, because even the reporters who cover it every day don't fully understand how it happens. Alyssa has a gazillion great stories about all the tricks she used to throw the press off the case when she was trying to have interviews between Barack Obama and Joe Biden or John Kerry and other people. And hopefully it's a lot of fun for folks, and we'll just give people, much like the mini series that Tommy Vitor did earlier this year and late last year about Iowa, it's a chance for us to have a more in-depth conversation about how something works that is detached from sort of the hamster wheel of horribleness that is sort of talking about the Trump news on Pod Save America daily basis. So I hope people check it out. I think the vice presidential selection is always important, of course. It is, there are just politically, there are 5 moments that matter in a presidential campaign: the convention speech, the 3 debates, and the vice presidential pick. We don't know. The convention is going to be different, at least. Who knows if Donald Trump is going to show up to any of these debates. So this may be the most important political moment that Joe Biden has in the campaign. And then, he has billed this person as the bridge to the future. So it's going to, whoever he picks is not just going to be his partner in governing, but potentially the face of the party in what comes next. So very excited for people to check it out and hope they enjoy it. And thank you for giving me that easily layup for a plug.
Awesome. That sounds really great. I really can't wait to listen to that. I love Alyssa Mastromonaco and you as well. So that sounds really exciting. Everybody make sure you listen tomorrow. So Dan, thank you so much for being here tonight. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, this was so much fun. And the thing I would just say to everyone is the question that I think we all have to ask ourselves between now and election day is, are we doing enough, right? Are we making ourselves uncomfortable because we're doing so much? Are we pushing ourselves out of our boundary? And if we do that, we control the fate of this election, because there are more people in this country who support what progressives and Joe Biden support and oppose what Donald Trump does than the opposite. So our fate is in our hands.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. So, all right, we're going to get the training now. Everybody shout out Dan in the chat. That was awesome. So a big part of training, of course, is being able to pass a quiz. So I'm going to pass things over to the man who has been answering all of your emails in the Vote Save America inbox, Danny Gottfried. He is our National Research Associate, and he is here to test your knowledge. Danny, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. I've enjoyed answering all of your emails, but I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. We have a couple of questions for you to see what you learned in the first couple of trainings. So let's look at question number 1. The question is, what are the 3 phases of the election? Option 1, voter registration, get out the vote, persuasion. Option 2, capacity building, persuasion, get out the vote. Option 3, persuasion, voter identification, volunteer development. And option 4, hard asks, relational organizing, social media recruitment. So I'll give you all a second or two to submit your responses in the poll. It looks like we're getting a lot of correct answers. And yes, the correct answer is option 2, capacity building, persuasion, get out the vote. So great job to all of you. And let's move on to our second question. Question number 2 is, what phase are we in right now? The options are option 1, persuasion, option 2, capacity building, option 3, get out the vote, or option 4, waiting until the convention. I hope we get no waiters until the convention. So I'll give you another few seconds to submit your responses. Again, it looks like a lot of you are getting this right. And the correct answer is option 2, capacity building. So good job. We have one final question for you. The final question is more of an open response question. So please use the chat box and tell us in your own words how building capacity will help us defeat Donald Trump in November. And very many of you are answering and the chat box is going crazy, but let me see if I can read some of these responses. More people, more voting, recruiting others to help. Some of you are saying relational organizing, leveraging our power, educating others, donating your time. It looks like all of you have some great responses and you've been paying close attention in the trainings thus far. So thank you all for participating in our polls. And I'm going to hand things over to our training director from Pennsylvania, Megan Blickman, to take you through the next important step in capacity building.
Thanks, Danny. Now that you've all started learning about relational organizing and making hard asks and incorporating storytelling into your volunteering, we want to help you step it up to the next level. The most impactful thing you can do to support any campaign is to help them build capacity. And the way you do that is through teams of committed volunteers. Remember this image? This is a sustainable team model that field organizers spend months building. But to defeat Donald Trump in the fall, organizers are going to need more help than ever. One of the key things the Obama coalition did in 2008 and 2012 is give volunteers the tools and training to become neighborhood team leaders and what we call super volunteers now. Yeah, snowflakes, exactly. That's what I'm seeing in the chat. So I know that most of you don't live in your adopted state, and that's no big deal. We're going to prepare you to be a virtual team leader. Here are some common volunteer roles. These roles are field tested and they help everyone find a place to shine and feel as though they are contributing to the team. So first you have a team leader. This is typically the person that keeps the wheels in motion and makes sure that you all are meeting the goals that you set out to do. There's also the canvas captain and the phone bank captain. So these roles make sure that volunteers are ready to talk directly to community members, which includes training and setting up regular events. And hopefully we'll be able to canvas when it's safe and healthy to do so. We also have the data captain, and this role is so essential and a bit more behind the scenes. This is for someone that has an eye for numbers and likes learning about data. Full disclosure, I'm a bad data captain. Digital captain, who on your team is the social media whisperer? This role is for someone who is passionate about creating a drumbeat for your volunteer work online. Last is the comfort captain. This role is, for that person that thrives on making sure everyone is comfortable. Snacks, good music, whatever it takes. So as you think about building your team, you should ask yourselves these questions. First, who do I know that might be good to fill these roles? And what are other roles that would be helpful to have? So, for example, for the educators on this call, you might have a unique talent in connecting with other educators in your adopted state. So you might become the educator recruiter. And this goes for any constituency group. You and your team should also be clear on what each of these roles do. All that said, there are some challenges and strengths to this traditional organizing team model. As far as the challenges, it assumes that everyone fits into a role. It can feel a little bit rigid, and it's traditionally organized geographically. But there's also some strengths. It takes into account your team's goals, it's structured, it gives everyone an identity, and there's also an incredible opportunity to be creative by inventing the new roles that are important to you. So what goes into creating this volunteer team? You might have an idea of people that you'd like to add to your team, but likely over the course of the year, you'll also find new people to add to your team. And honestly, I love making new friends when I volunteer. Anecdotally, I actually spent most of my quarantine living with a friend that I met volunteering in 2012. You never know what's going to happen. When you are recruiting new people to volunteer, there are some key best practices to bringing people in. First, build trust. You just have to think of it as starting a relationship. And second, you should meet people where they are. And by that, I mean, understand what motivates them and, what they're interested in. Third, you should begin with those low bar asks. And by that, I mean, make it easy to get involved. Fourth, be clear and organized. And fifth, implement systems of mutual accountability as well. Volunteers and volunteer leaders are going to work together throughout each phase of the campaign to register, persuade, and then ultimately get the vote on election day. And this work is going to require us to be creative and scrappy and, think of the ways that someone will want to get involved. As you're building your team, you're also going to end up having to do some research and to get creative. So ask yourself, what are the community events that bring people together around issues that align with the campaign I'm volunteering for? Which community groups share our values and may have members who also want to join our team? Are there organizations who might be good ally groups to work with for occasional events? And where do like-minded folks hang out? So we've got the how of teams down, but what about a why? Take a minute and think about what are the perks for you of working together as a team? What feels powerful about working together on a team? Accountability, motivation, tons of other people, share the road, support, camaraderie, having fun. Oh, I love camaraderie and having fun. Yeah, and also hitting goals. I see the Fab Five a ton. Cheers to the Fab Five, whoever you are. That's awesome. Anyway, so the bottom line here is that teams allow us to build long-term power, feel less alone in this fight, and achieve bigger goals. With all that said, it's important that we know why volunteers stay and keep coming back to make sure that we retain the amazing talent in this work. So what keeps volunteers coming back? It'll likely be different for all different types of folks. So for example, if you're introverted like me, you might keep coming back if we do a really good job of connecting your volunteer actions to a larger purpose. Or if you're extroverted, the deep relationships that you develop with your volunteers might be your biggest motivator for returning. It's something for you to be aware of and deliberative when you start working with your team. Remember, Our first step of volunteer recruitment, focus on the relationship. Every team needs leaders, and that's where all of you come in. Your passion and enthusiasm to win your state is contagious. You all have made me such a proud Pennsylvanian, and I know my coworkers in Wisconsin, Florida, Michigan, Arizona, and North Carolina feel the same. You might not think of yourself as a leader or as a person who is prepared to do this work. And I know that during the first training just a couple of weeks ago, around 50% of you said that you were new to this work, but you're not anymore. So here's my hard ask for you. I need you to free yourself of that mindset. Will you become a virtual leader for your adopted state? I'm going to pass it over to the two Ashleys to talk you through how to do it.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks for bearing with some technical difficulties there. Apparently, when you do a poll on Zoom, it just kicks everyone off. So shout out to the national training team for just working right through that, and shout out to Megan for keeping going. So we have this image on the screen again that you have seen maybe in almost every single training. The reason we keep bringing you back to it is because those organizers that you've met over the past few weeks are working to build teams that look just like this. It's a sustainable team that can go the distance and do the hard work it takes to defeat our opponents. The field organizers you've met each week, they're the blue people. And each of you, all 60,000 people who've gone through this training, you are now the larger green people. You have what it takes to be a leader of a volunteer team. But before you tune out and say, I don't like public speaking, or I don't know enough to lead others, or whatever thoughts are coming up for you right now, hold on, because we're going to teach you a simple 5-step process to understand how you can bring your unique skills and strengths and the things that you do in your regular life to a campaign. But first, as always, we want to hear from you in the chat box. So tell us, when you think of a leader, who comes to mind? Obama, agreed. Bernie, Oprah, Michelle. I love that it's all first name basis here. Elizabeth Warren. Your boss, Andrew Cuomo. My mom loves Andrew Cuomo. Obama and your friend Lisa, AOC, Pete, LeBron, lots of Pete, Beyonce. Yes, we need Beyonce to run for Congress. Awesome. So those are all really great examples of leaders, and keep them coming. But I want us to expand what we classify as a leader. So to me, a great leader includes the teachers. I saw there were many of you in the chat box, those teachers who are giving their class extra support to keep up during the pandemic. It's the person who organizes their friends to bring food to parents with a new baby. It's the person, and I bet this is many of you, who shows up to a protest with masks and hand sanitizer to help keep people safe. Each of those people are demonstrating their leadership skills too. So way back when Ashley Arnold, who is behind the scenes and whose beautiful slides you're looking at right now, when she and I first started working together, I remember we actually talked about this training module and our views on leadership, which were a little different than what either of us, I think, were expecting the other to say. So I'm going to pass it over to Ashley. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on leadership?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, Ashley. And thank you all for being with us again during our tech difficulties. And I can't really say that they're my ideas. So I geek out for this labor organizer and author and academic, Jane McKelvey. She's written many books and she was a labor organizer for a really long time. And she talks about how leadership, how we need to have a more inclusive definition of leadership and how anyone can really be a leader. So really thinking about what it means to be a leader, the first thing is a leader is someone that goes to bat for other people. So it's the person that advocates for their team, who shows up consistently for them. The second thing is leaders step up and they do the hard things. So this could be, hey, I know we need to get to 100 calls tonight. I'm going to stay late and make sure that happens. I'm going to do, those 10 extra calls. Leaders also take care of their team and the people that they're in charge of. So that really combines those first two things. And lastly, leaders delegate to others. So this one is not super easy. It really, it means that you know your strengths and your weaknesses and you say, hey, I'm not the best at this thing, but I'm going to make sure that that person gets time to shine because I know that they're better at it. And like I said, you know, like Ashley talked about and Megan, it comes down to really throwing off this notion that leaders are people who are good at public speaking, or they're people who are always, you know, in the front of the room, telling people what to do. A leader is just somebody who is kind, shows up for people, and knows what they can do to prioritize and get where they need to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I love all of that. I saw a ton of people shouting out the introvert leaders. I will spare you my rant about how introverts are the best leaders, but I will let you know 98% of the people you've seen week after week in these trainings are all introverts. Something about being an introvert makes you a good trainer, apparently. So some of the best leaders I've seen in campaigns are volunteers. They're the people who stay late to clean up the field office because the staff is in a meeting, or they show up for their first day of being a data volunteer, and within a few days, they're leading a whole team of volunteers, right? So each of these people are crucial to the success of a campaign and the sustainability of a team. So we put together a really easy 5-step process to identify what type of leader you are and how you can bring your unique skills and talents and the things you do in your everyday life to a campaign. So you should spend some time working through these questions in the worksheets that Vote Save America sent out a couple hours ago. And don't worry, they will also be on the Vote Save America website, but we'll go through them here together quickly. So question number 1, what do you love to do, right? So we all have things that we can do for an endless amount of time without looking at the clock. You just get in that flow state and you just like bang it out, get it done. So that is a really like good idea or a good way to see what you could be a leader at on a campaign. Like maybe you like love talking to people. That would not be me, but maybe you love talking to people one-on-one. You would make an amazing organizer because so much of the work we do is talking to people one-on-one, right? Number 2, what am I terrible at that I should delegate to others? So as Ashley mentioned, great leaders know that they can't do it all. You need to be able to ask other people for help. So identifying the things that you're not good at. For me, it would be making slides look nice, which is why I delegate to Ashley and she makes them so pretty for you all. So great leaders, not to say that I am one, but great leaders know that they have to delegate things to other people. Number 3 is one of my favorites. So we all have the ways that we see ourselves and our own skills that may not be how other people see us. So you can ask yourself, what do people ask me for help with or ask for my advice on? This is a way to see how other people see you as a thought leader or as an expert on something, right? So Ashley, after a while, is gonna like, everyone's gonna come to her and say like, show me how to make pretty slides, show me how to design beautiful slides. She now hopefully knows that she is a leader around that, right? So that is incredibly valuable to a campaign, especially in this world where everything is happening on Zoom. So if you too are a great designer, campaigns need you. Number 4 is a little coachy, but it's also another one that I love a lot. So question 4 is, what do I value? So you should all at some point in your life, Google, or like now basically you should Google core values. So those are things that's similar to your why, that like motivating thing that is important to you that you want in all areas of your life. So it could be things like loyalty, reliability, consistency, honesty, efficiency. Knowing what your core values are, again, will help you identify your strengths that you can contribute to a campaign. So one of mine is efficiency, right? So I walk into a campaign office as a volunteer and like immediately look at the room and how it's like not set up for people to get in and out quickly, or on Zoom, you know, behind the scenes that you all don't see, we have a very detailed spreadsheet we're all following along. So efficiency, if you value, or if that's one of your core values, that is something you could bring. And then question number 5 is, how do I take care of others, right? So one of the things Ashley mentioned was that part of being a leader is taking care of the people in your charge. And so how you do that for other people will be different for each of us. I have a dear friend here in New York who is sort of an organizing legend, who loves to bake. She likes to make homemade buttons, and she is a phenomenal organizer because, one, everyone wants to talk to her because she's standing there with a plate of cookies. Everyone wants to come to her phone banks at her house to call voters because, you know, there's going to be good food and a cute dog, and they want a free button, right? So the things that you naturally do, the things that you do for your family, if you're like the super organized soccer mom who like has a calendar with like every single like detailed activity, like that is so valuable to a campaign. So what do you do to take care of the people you love? That is something you can also bring to a team. So again, as we've mentioned, we know that a lot of you are new to politics and organizing and volunteering. So if you feel like you're too new or you don't know enough to help on a campaign, I want to tell you, you are wrong. There is so much work to be done. And our organizers that you've met week after week, they cannot do it without you. It's just impossible. There's just not enough of them to talk to all the voters, right? So they need you. And my absolute favorite thing about organizing is that there's a place for everyone. Like immediately you see that you are needed, you are necessary, and you'll be surrounded virtually or otherwise with like-minded people, which is such an inspiring feeling, as I'm sure you're all feeling right now in the chat box, seeing so many people showing up to do this work. So as we are winding down this training series, it has been incredible to see how energized you all are to do this work. So we want to fill you in on what's next. So I'm going to pass it over to our training manager for North Carolina, who is working remotely from the great state of Texas, Michelle Butler.
Thanks, Ashley. We're going to tell you a bit about what these next phases of an election normally look like. And we're also going to think about the ways in which they'll be different due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, no election is the same and no election cycle is totally predictable. But over the years, experts in the field have broken up the timeline of an election year into these phases that are normally pretty predictable. We've talked a lot about capacity or volunteer recruitment, so I'm going to skip that one. In the persuasion phase of an election, what you would typically be doing is showing up to a campaign field office in the community to make calls to high priority voters. Out-of-state volunteers help with this by joining virtual phone banks from anywhere. And then would also be sending out volunteers to go knock on doors and talk to people face-to-face about what issues matter to them, who they think they'll vote for, and asking them to commit to vote in November. Again, out-of-state folks can help with this too if they live close enough. Many volunteer teams or chapters will caravan or fill a bus to talk to voters for a day or over a weekend. The Obama campaign pioneered taking a vacation in a swing state, where they encouraged volunteers to travel to a swing state and volunteer for a longer chunk of time. Then during the final days of the election, the efforts turn into getting out the vote, aka GOTV. Campaigns will open up more spaces called staging locations. Then they'll follow up with people who have committed to vote. We make sure people know their polling location and hours. We often help arrange transportation to the polls for folks who need it. And we have the all-important make a plan conversation, which helps voters walk through their schedule on election day to make sure that they have time to vote. So that is what an election normally looks like. And obviously 2020 is not a normal election. Our organizing, digital, and training teams sat down this week to start thinking through what the rest of the cycle is going to look like. And here are some top ideas that we think will shape the next 5 months of the election. There will likely be less emphasis on having a physical office to go to. So instead, we imagine online offices like we've had at O2 2020. Pop-up volunteer locations where an organizer will have all the materials in their trunk and volunteers can safely grab what they need to drop off campaign literature or voter registration forms. We know voter registration will still be so important. As you all learned last week, all campaigns will focus heavily on vote by mail, which can be done without direct contact to other people. But for most voters, voting by mail is totally new. So we'll still need to do in-person voter registration. We'll need extensive plans to keep volunteers and voters safe. We'll need things like masks and gloves for every volunteer, tons of pens, and people to fill out their form without having to share their pen with others, and lots of wipes and hand sanitizer. So voters can see that we're taking every precaution necessary. We also know that relationship building and talking to people we know will be the most impactful thing each of us can do in these battleground states. Even if people, like many of you, are volunteering from afar away, we think the key to turning people out this fall will be focusing on not just talking to voters during GOTV, but building ongoing relationships with them. People vote because they're asked, and that's where you come in. As Alexis mentioned, organizing together is ramping down, but don't worry. Vote Save America will be sharing lots of other opportunities with you for the rest of 2020. And we're so excited to have Cricket Media's political director, Shaniqua McClendon, joining us to tell us a bit more about what's coming up. Hi, Shaniqua.
Hi, Michelle, and hi, everyone who's joining.
We're so excited to have you here. And we have a couple of questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some ways Vote Save America is going to help everyone on the call tonight stay engaged through November, even if we're not able to do many of the campaign activities that we usually turn to?
Yeah, so the first thing we're going to do is give everyone a short little break. I know we've been doing these trainings for 4 weeks straight, but after the 4th of July holiday, we're going to start sending out emails with very specific calls to action. And these calls to action, we didn't make them up. We've spent the last year talking to organizers, progressive organizations, state parties, consultants, tons of people in the 6 states that everyone has adopted to figure out what is the most impactful thing that volunteers can participate in to help flip the state that they have adopted. So you'll start getting those emails soon, and they'll include things like texting voters or calling voters, but they will also include really specific reasons why and specific messages to convey to whichever voters you're speaking with. So if you're speaking to voters who are maybe in an area that's pretty progressive but has low voter turnout, you'll be talking to voters to increase voter turnout and get them engaged. But if you're talking to people who are maybe in a more swing state or swing area, you'll be probably trying to convince them to vote for Joe Biden.
Wonderful. That sounds so exciting. And I know everyone has been so inspired by our organizers who do this work full time. We know that not everyone is able to pick up and move to a battleground state and do this full time. What is something folks can do to support the work of those who can't?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure that most of the people on this call have been called by a volunteer or had a volunteer knock on their door. And I'm sure that many of you have also been the people calling voters or knocking on someone's door. And, all of the lists, the scripts, the literature, the office space that you volunteer in, all of that stuff doesn't just kind of appear out of thin air. They take resources. So some of the calls to action that we actually will send through our Adopt a State program will be to help to raise funds for those organizations and programs that will be integral to flipping the 6 states that we're hoping to flip this year.
That is so awesome. And so I have one last question for you. What action do you want everyone on the call tonight to take? What's your hard ask for them?
My hard ask is for everyone very quickly in your head to think of 5 people that you will reach out to after this call to get them to adopt the state that you've adopted. Come up with your reason, your hard sell for them to do it. And then after this call, take the time to reach out to those folks. So call or text them and make the pitch for your state and ask them to join you in this fight, I guess we're going to call it, to flip these 6 states in November.
That is so wonderful, Shaniqua. And you know what? I'm excited to see what all 150,000 Adopt a State volunteers will do over these next 5 crucial months, including following what you told them. Call 5 of your friends and get them to send some money so that, we can continue on with the fight that we're in. Thanks again, Shaniqua. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone who adopted North Carolina and all the other states.
Love it. All right, so moving forward, I am so excited to introduce our next guest. I'm going to try to do it without falling out of my chair, without geeking out so hard. Our next guest is Stacey Abrams. She is the chair of Fair Fight Action. Stacey Abrams is a best-selling author, a serial entrepreneur, nonprofit CEO, and political leader. After serving as minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives, Abrams became the 2018 Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia, where she won more votes than any other Democrat in the state's history. Over the course of her career, she has founded multiple organizations devoted to voting rights, training and hiring young people of color, and tackling social issues. Her most recent endeavor include launching Fair Fight, Fair Count, and the Southern Economic Advancement Project. Her newest book, Our Time Is Now, was released in June 2020. Miss Stacey Abrams, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor to be able to pop in and say hi.
Oh my God, we're so excited. And we are ready to hear what you have to tell us. And we have a couple of questions. And yeah, let's take it away.
Well, I want to begin. No, go.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I'm the guest. I'm Southern. I'm going to stop talking. What to do.
Yes. No, I'm handing it over to you, Queen. You go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you to everyone who is on this call, all the work that's being done. I'm here to do three things. One is to say thank you. The work that you are doing is going to be not just critical, but essential to winning in 2020. I know there's all this conversation about how we have to take out Trump, how we have to do the work of winning the Senate, but I want us to remember that we are working on fixing America, that we need to win our country back. This isn't about making something greater or lesser or better, or it's about survival. It's about the survival of Black and brown folks. It's about the survival of democracy. It's about the renewal of our commitment to justice. And it's about creating a commitment to justice for the first time that includes everyone who's here. We know that the pathway to that justice, the pathway to democracy, the pathway to a better United States comes through you, because this is going to be a unprecedented battle. I know a lot of folks think about this as a redo of the 2016 election, our chance to get it right. And that's absolutely true, but it is so much bigger than that. We are not only running the 2016 election, we're running the 2010 election. And for those of you who remember the joyous moment of 2008 when Barack Obama strode that stage, if we remember the 2 years of progress that we made, let's remember what it felt like when it came to a screeching halt in November of 2010. Because it wasn't simply the sweep that we saw, it was what that sweep meant. We saw Republicans take over state after state after state, and what they got when they won was the ability to control the maps that would control our destiny, not for a decade, but for a generation. Because it's going to take us a generation to undo the evil that has been done, to undo the harm that's been done to our reputation, to our emotions, to our science, to our future. And we know that in 2020, we are not only electing a new president, we have to elect everyone up and down the ballot, and we have to make certain that we have a census that reflects who we are. Because right now, the Republicans are doing their level best, not just to steal an election, they're trying to steal the future. And here's how they're doing it. Number one, they are pushing voter suppression as hard as they can everywhere they can. I saw that really pretty slide. Y'all are missing a state. Georgia should be there, but we'll get there eventually. But we know that in those 6 states, as well as we would say 12 others, there is a hardcore push for voter suppression to silence the voices of Americans, to tell citizens that their rights are not real. And this isn't new and it isn't news, but for the first time, groups like yours organizing together and Vote Save America, we have come together to make sure that we are fighting back before the battle is lost. Because too often we have these conversations in October, maybe September, August if we're lucky. But we've been fighting this battle and gathering our intel, doing our work since last year. And because of that, we are prepared for the first time to meet them in battle, fully armed and ready to go. But we know that what's happening isn't just about voter suppression. It's about making sure that people doubt the election itself. That's why you hear Donald Trump talking about vote by mail as some evil scourge, even though he does it, his family does it, his cabinet does it, his friends do it. He just doesn't want us to do it. But what we have watched happen in state after state after state, driven by COVID, but cemented by democracy, is that voters are willing to take the risk and they're going to vote by mail because they know their voices deserve to be heard. But it's also about making sure not only are their voices heard, but that they create literal space for those who have no choice but to vote in person. We know that if you are a member of the disabled community, if you have a language barrier, if you're Native American and live out of the reach of postal service, if you are displaced by COVID-19, if you are homeless because of the inaction and the deep apathy that pervades the Republican Party, if you tried to vote by mail and it didn't work, which is what happened to me, then you have to be able to get in line in November. And that means we have to fight for the HEROES Act. We have to fight for the $3.6 billion and the laws that will make vote by mail universal. Not that everyone in the universe has to use it, but everyone has the right to it. And that's critical. But beyond the voter suppression piece, we've got to think about the census suppression. It started in 2019 and actually started a decade ago, where they started basically strategizing about how to weaponize the census, how to undermine participation among the communities that can change the fabric of our nation. That's why they've done their best to scare people with the citizenship question, which isn't there. They've done their best to do misinformation into Black and brown communities, saying if you filled it out, they could use it to make you pay your child support or arrest you or issue a warrant. None of it's true. The only thing that is true is that if we don't participate in the 2020 census, they will use it to draw lines of politics for redistricting that will control our lives for the next decade and undermine us for the next generation. This is our story, and we need to be in it. If you lived here on April 1st, 2020, then you are entitled to be included in the census, and we need every single person to fill it out. And often that's not considered an organizing issue in an election, but here's why the census matters. It's not only the $1.5 trillion to tackle the systemic inequities, to tackle the challenges we see. It's also the political power that we lost in 2010. It's how we get it back. It's how we make certain that reapportionment actually reflects the growing populations in progressive places where progress has moved in and the conservatives are being pushed out. We've got to show up, but we also have to be there to elect the right people to draw the maps, and that happens through state legislatures in almost every state. Number 3, we have to believe that voter suppression is not bigger than we are. Now, I talked about what they've done and I've talked about what we can do, but here's what we have to believe. President Obama said it, and I know you've heard it again and again. If you think you've done enough, you haven't even begun. Because they're trying to undermine our faith in democracy. They're trying to undermine our faith in this nation. When we watch demonstrations and we hear it parsed out and they turn it into verbal debates about the language used instead of about the substance and about the way justice has been abused, that's their attempt to distract us. It's their attempt to make sure that we're arguing over what's in the justice and policing bill as opposed to what's happening on our streets and what's killing our people. We know that we got a good Supreme Court case for the LGBTQ community. We know we got a good decision for the Dreamers. But they know it's temporary if they can hold power, if they can expand that power, if they can deepen that power. And the best way to do that is to convince us it's not worth trying. And your job, your incredible opportunity is to remind people that this is our country and the power of democracy belongs to us. That when they break the systems, when they break the machinery of democracy, they don't just break it for the people they're targeting, they break it for everyone. But in 2018, when I went against the architect of voter suppression in the Deep South, a man who purged 1.4 million people, a man who helped oversee the closure of 214 precincts, which meant that up to 85,000 people could not cast a ballot, a man who held 53,000 registrations hostage, 70% of which belonged to Black voters, and 80% were people of color, a man who made himself the scorekeeper, the referee, and the contestant. When he did what he did, we should have sat down and shut up. But instead, we tripled Latino turnout. We tripled Asian Pacific Islander turnout. We increased youth participation rates by 139%. We increased Black participation by 40%, which doesn't sound nearly as exciting until you realize that in 2014, 1.1 million people, Democrats voted for governor, 1.1 million total. And in 2018, 1.2 million Black people voted for me. We changed the face of democracy, and we didn't just do it for people of color. We didn't just build a new coalition. We built a multiracial, multi-generational coalition because we increased white participation for the first time in 30 years. We won because we transformed the electorate and we transformed people's belief in their power. And I know we did it because I watched this year as we had one of the worst examples of voter suppression, the incompetence and malfeasance of Brian Kemp's handpicked successor as Secretary of State, when his deliberate indifference led to 8-hour lines. Part of what we saw was record turnout, a record so large it eclipsed the 2008 turnout rates. We outperformed Republicans by 182,000 votes. And if we can do that in deep, it's not deep red, but we're in the deep South. If we can do that in the deep South, and if we can do that in a state that's been written off as red, imagine what we can do in places that know they're blue, in places that know they're purple, in places like Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona and Florida, places that are waiting for us to show up, waiting to hear from us, and waiting to know that if they fight, we will fight with them. That if they turn out, we will stand with them. That when Republicans lift their army of 50,000 poll observers to scare them out of line, we'll have 100,000 strong putting them back in line. And that we'll be fighting them in the courts, fighting them in the streets, and we're going to be fighting them and beating them at the ballot box. And so I'm here to tell you the war is gauged. We are engaged, we are ready, but most importantly, if we do our work, if we don't let up, if we don't forget our values, and if we don't forget the faces and the names of those who are counting on us to make change, that I promise you, together we'll win. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. I mean, you got me ready to grab a packet and go knock on somebody's door right now. That's how excited I am. And everyone back there, if that didn't light a fire under you, I don't know what will. That was excellently put. And I have one more question before, sadly, I have to let you go. What would you say to someone watching this training who's thinking to themselves, I'm only one person. Is my work going to make a difference?
Absolutely. We have to remember that this training is part of a network of change. And that when you reach those 5 people that you've been asked to reach, when you talk to those 5 folks that you need to touch, what you're doing is creating a 5-fold effect on what can happen. Because none of us keep information to ourselves. We're bad at it. As humans, we like to talk. And the minute you get 5 people to listen, that means that there are 5 people that each of them will touch that's going to change. And this is about a chain reaction. It's about the fact that not a single person can create change on our own. There are no saviors. There is no salvation that comes from the skies. It comes from the ground, and it comes from us. And as one person, you are touching lives that change the future. My election was decided by 54,723 people. But I know of at least 80,000 people who wanted to be there who couldn't show up, and 80,000 more who were told that they weren't enough. And if you are one of the people who touches that person who thought that it didn't matter, who was defeated by voter suppression instead of enraged by it, you are the person who can make sure that rage turns into action instead of that defeat turning into despair. Your voice is the voice that makes change. And the reality is you are a voice in a chorus. You're not a lone singer doing a solo. You are part of a mighty chorus that can create change. And that's why your voice is so critical. And that's why the work you all are doing together is going to change America.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for answering that. I know somebody out there is inspired. Somebody received the word today. Stacey, thank you for giving us a wonderful dose of Black girl magic and just being who you are. We stand all day long. Thank you for being here. Now I'm gonna give it back to Ashley to close us out. Bye, Stacey.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Stacey. That's a very hard act to follow, and we are almost done, but it's so amazing to have Stacey on. I first heard her on Pod Save America ages ago, so this is another very weird full circle moment. So yeah, everybody, this is it. We have reached the end, but we want to hear from you one more time in the chat box. So let's all calm ourselves a bit from how hyped we all are and think about waking up on Wednesday, November 4th, the day after the election. So if you could describe in one word how you want to feel when you wake up, what word would that be? Go ahead and put it in the chat box, and we'll see if we can get the slides back up, but it's okay if not. Relief, proud, excited, relieved, exhilarated, elated, relieved, lots of relief, hopeful, empowered, energized, saved. That's a good one. Victorious, hopeful. Cool. Alexis, do you want to maybe take over screen share so we can have those last couple of slides up? I'm just going to keep reading off words because they're amazing. Lots of relieved, lots of hope, motivated, thrilled, proud. So the question was, how do you want to feel when you wake up on Wednesday, the day after the election? Accomplished, grateful, hopeful, elated, amazing, sobbing, for sure. Those are all such good words. So I think we may have broken Zoom again. That is okay. Although I really want you all to see the last slide. So let me see if I can screen share. Because I really want you to see it because it's the most inspiring one. Keep dropping those great words in the chat box. Technology is hard. And actually, I don't have the slides. Oh, the best slide was saved for last, but it's okay. So we want to thank you all so much. So in the past 4 weeks, we've trained, as we said, over 60,000 people. There are 150,000 people who have adopted states to volunteer in for the rest of the cycle. So the volunteers who have signed up are in all 50 states. They're in Puerto Rico, they're Americans living abroad and watching at all different time zones. So shout out to all of you. We see you and appreciate you. It has absolutely blown us away, the response to this. So many of you have already taken actions with us and with other Vote Save America partners, but sadly tonight the training comes to an end. And there we go. That is a happy photo of when we used to be able to go outdoors. Hopefully we will get there again. Those are the happy faces of volunteers feeling so joyful. Shout out to everyone on those slides. Lots of dear friends of all of ours. So as this training wraps up, you are now volunteer leaders. So if tonight was a graduation ceremony, this would be the moment where you move your tassel from right to left. So feel free to do that at home. But as every graduate knows, as challenging as school may have been, it's going out and actually applying what you learned in the real world where it can feel a little intimidating. So my ask, my hard ask of all of you is that you leave here tonight and take the next action. Don't let what you've learned die here. If each person who attended this training series gets 8 people to vote in these battleground states, we would close the margin in the places that Donald Trump won in 2016. We could throw him out of office and begin the long road to repair the damage he and his enablers in Congress have done. So as Shaniqua said a little earlier, the ask for tonight is that each and every one of you share the link to sign up to adopt a state. Don't just think you can only share it with 5 people and they're all going to say yes. We use something called organizer math, which means 50% of the people you ask are going to say no, and 50% of the people who say yes are going to flake on you. So really put it out there, ask people directly, use all the skills you've been learning, your relational organizing, telling your personal story. All of those skills are going to help you. You're all going to recruit at least 5 people to volunteer in your adopted state. So whether that is virtual volunteering or hopefully someday in-person volunteering. And so we are so grateful. So as we've said, if you've never been involved before, and if you never get again after 2020, this is it. We've got one shot, and future generations will look at us and ask what we did in this moment. And I know what I want my answer to be. So on behalf of all of us at Organizing Together 2020 and our new friends at Vote Save America, we are so grateful to all of you for showing up each week. We will see you out there in the virtual field. And remember, we cannot do this without you. We cannot win without you. Thank you all so, so much. And we will see you out in the field.